Well, hello and welcome to our second webinar in our webinar series. We are OCD Midwest. We are an affiliate of the International OCD Foundation that represents the states of Ohio, Indiana, and Illinois. And we just wanted to welcome and thank you for being here for our Valentine's Day webinar. This is going to be about relationship OCD and how it can involve itself in relationships. This webinar is meant to serve as educational content and advocacy, and the contents of this webinar is not intended to replace professional help or treatment. To locate a treatment provider, please visit www.iocdf.org. If you're in crisis or you feel unsafe, please call 911 or go to your nearest emergency room. With us today, we've got three special people, and I was going to go ahead and start with the introductions right now. We've got John Bomarito. He's a peer recovery supporter for the state of Ohio. He's an individual with lived experience with OCD, and he is a board member of OCD Midwest. We've got Melanie, and she is a patient and consumer advocate. She also has lived experience with OCD and hoarding disorder. I'm Mike Sizemore. I am also a peer recovery supporter for the state of Ohio, and I'm a member with OCD Midwest on the board. And last but not least, we have Carrie Curran. She is a licensed clinical social worker. She has 20 years of clinical experience and is currently the executive director of the Depression and Anxiety Specialty Clinic of Chicago, as well as the director of DBT and group services. She's a certified diplomat with the Academy of Cognitive Therapy. She provides group and individual services at DASC, which is the Depression and Specialty Clinic of Chicago and Anxiety Clinic of Chicago. Her work includes acceptance and commitment therapy, exposure and response prevention, motivational interviewing, and dialectical behavior therapy. She specializes in anxiety disorders, including OCD, panic disorder, generalized anxiety, social phobia, and specific phobias, in addition to personality disorders, depression, and trauma. So it's great to have you here for our Valentine's Day special. And just some general questions just to sort of start us off. I was going to ask Carrie some questions about, just to sort of kind of break it down for some specifics around this relationship OCD subtype. So, but before we get to that, can I just ask you a question, Carrie? Before we get to relationship OCD, what is OCD in the clinical definition?
Yeah, well, first of all, thanks so much for having me here. So OCD is a disorder that is characterized by obsessions and compulsions, as the name might indicate. So obsessions are things that tend to be intrusive, distressing thoughts, images, and compulsions are whatever it is that we do to try and get rid of those or minimize the distress that's associated with that. And the thing with OCD is it becomes quite a tricky cycle where we have these distressing thoughts or images. We do something because naturally, of course, we all want to get away from discomfort. So we do something and we feel a little bit less distress in the moment. But that is the very thing that feeds the obsessions, and then the cycle kind of continues. So with relationship OCD, as you mentioned, Mike, it's what we would consider a subtype of OCD. So for those of you who aren't familiar, OCD has various themes or subtypes. So relationship OCD, for example, it's not an official diagnosis or anything that you would find in the DSM, but it is one of the fairly common themes that we see with OCD. And so with relationship OCD, it's, as you might guess, it's the distressing or upsetting thoughts tend to be centered around our relationships. And the tricky thing with OCD is that it usually goes after the things that we care about the most in life. That's why you might see a new mother, for example, developing OCD around her baby, or perhaps someone whose religion is very important to them might develop scrupulosity as another theme or subtype of OCD. And so I always sort of think of it as humans, we're kind of hardwired to be social beings, to affiliate. And if you think back to kind of a tribal time, looking back through evolution, we needed our relationships for survival. They literally kind of meant life or death. So it sort of makes sense that for people, our relationships are sometimes the most important thing to us. And so therefore, OCD being sort of the insidious thing that it can be sometimes tends to go after that. So it's not uncommon to see this theme. And some examples of what relationship OCD might entail would be obsessive worry about your romantic partner. So it might be thoughts of, is this the right person for me? Is there someone better out there? Am I making a mistake? How do I know if they're the right one? Should I be more attracted to them? Oh, they just did this thing and I didn't really like that. Does that mean something? Does that mean that they're not the right person for me? And so with OCD, we see kind of the core of it is really an intolerance or such difficulty with uncertainty. And relationships are hard because they are not like, there's a lot of uncertainty. There's good times, there's bad times. There's no knowing for sure if someone is the right one. It's not like an answer that we can eventually find if we think hard enough about it. So I think with relationship OCD, it's a lot of that uncertainty and distress that comes around trying to figure out if this is the right relationship for me or the right partner for me. Would it be helpful for me to talk a little bit about what some common obsessions and compulsions might look like?
Well, I think you've covered the obsessive part quite well. Thank you for all that definition, Carrie. And I think you've covered the obsessive part quite well. I mean, the questions can be kind of endless,
Yeah.
As far as compulsions that go, like, I mean, kind of like what people do, what people might do in a relationship. I mean, what might some of those look like, if you can just name a few?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think the compulsions depend a little bit on what the obsessions are, and they might vary a bit from person to person, but compulsions, a lot of times in OCD, people think of the observable behaviors. So you think of kind of like the stereotypical OCD, people think of contamination OCD. So worries of germs or being contaminated, and then washing, cleaning, fixing types of behaviors. So it could be something observable. It can also be an internal act. And I think particularly with relationship OCD, we might see a lot of that. It could be ruminating. It could be trying to get to an answer, to figure out how do I know if this is the right one? It could be making comparisons to other people's relationships. We might find a lot of reassurance seeking. Sometimes we try and reassure ourselves or convince ourselves. Or we might ask our partner, do you think we're meant for each other? How do you know that we're right? Do you ever have these thoughts about me? And I have these thoughts about you. It could be going to like friends or family and asking them, how did you know that it was the right partner? Or do you ever feel unattracted to them? How often are you intimate with your partner? It's like, I think that sometimes the way to be able to decipher between a compulsion and like a healthy, normal way of getting advice and support from our friends and family is asking, like, are you asking them that because you're genuinely curious about their relationship? Or are you asking them that because you are looking to somehow figure it out? Like, if you just can figure out, is this what it's supposed to be like? So I think that the like ruminating, reassurance seeking, comparing are some of the big ones. You might also notice some hypervigilance. Someone might, be asking themselves, am I aroused by this person? Am I physically attracted to them? Like noticing everything that's happening in their body. You might see avoidance can be a common compulsion in OCD in general. And with relationship OCD, that might be avoiding commitment, not taking that next step. It might be avoiding rom-coms because it makes them think, why am I not feeling this thing? it could be, yeah, avoiding like difficult conversations, really anything that like triggers the uncertainty and the anxiety might be something that people start to avoid.
Yeah, you covered it. You covered it so well there, Carrie. Yeah, I was just sort of thinking about just some other information um, when when you were going on about that, and let's see, and uh, so we definitely have more to talk about, and as far as other compulsions go, I can I I mean I definitely can see like somebody in texting, maybe texting repeatedly, she hasn't gotten back to me. Does that mean that she's mad at me? Are you there? Are you mad at me? Something like that. And so anything that, yeah, like you said, just to sort of minimize or get rid of that, that uncertainty. And I mean, like you said, the compulsions are probably almost endless too in how they can present.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. The thing that I feel is so hard about relationship OCD is that the compulsions, I think, are sometimes the very thing that get in the way of us actually being able to figure out if it's the right relationship for me. Because some people might say, so if I'm trying to figure out if this is the right partner for me, and you're telling me that's the compulsion and not to do that, well, I have to think about the relationship. I can't just like commit to someone without knowing if they're right for me, or I can't just suspend having certainty and just stay in the relationship forever because at some point, like maybe I've wasted too much time with this person, or I found myself in too deep with a relationship I didn't want to be in. Um,
And
so I
and Carrie,
think,
sorry, not to interrupt, Carrie. I was just going to say this kind of like once again goes against like everything that we grow up thinking about and hearing about.
yes.
It's like, we hear people say, you know, um, well, you'll just know when it's the right person.
Yeah.
You know, um,
Yeah.
and things like that. And it's like that just doesn't work. It's but
Yeah, exactly. This is kind of a silly story, but sometimes you think back to like when you were a kid and these like really funny things that you believe that you can laugh about. I can remember as like a really little kid, I don't know where I got this idea, but somewhere I heard that like each person has one person out there for them. And so I thought like, but wait a minute, what if my person is like on the other side of the world? Like I thought it was like a magical, like you have this one person and once you find each other. And I remember thinking like, well, I mean, my mom found her person because they lived in the same city, but what if my person doesn't? It's just crazy. Like, I mean, granted, I was like very little when I thought that, but like we are inundated with these messages from like Disney movies and society telling us that like there's this one and they're this like magic person. And when you find them, you'll know. And I don't think that's the reality for a lot of people. But if that's what we're waiting for, it can be really stressful to try and figure that out if this is the perfect person for them or not.
yeah, thank you so much for that, Carrie. And it's true. I mean, reality doesn't work like the movies works. Not usually, anyway. But so John, I was going to go ahead and ask you. How has relationship? I mean, has OCD impacted your relationship in any way that you feel comfortable talking about?
Sure, it's impacted. I'd be lying if it hadn't impacted my relationship, negative and positive. Positive, like from the positive aspect, it increased our communication. So it wasn't, you can't just read, my wife couldn't just read my mind. I had to tell her what I needed in those moments of distress, and um, just being, humble enough to like talk about it and, tell her what's going on, and being able to be vulnerable in those moments. And then also just on the flip side, it's hard because it's just a constant, like, I was going through it the other day with her because she's been going through some issues herself, and I was like, she's like, why are you so hard on me? And I'm like, well, it's when I was going through at my worst, I was it felt like she was always attacking me, but it was just, she's not trying to give into the OCD. She's trying to be supportive, but also like, I'm going to, yes, OCD wants you to do XYZ, but we need to, I'm not doing that. And it's, the first reaction for anyone is why, like, why do you not like me? Why, why do you want to make my life miserable? But like learning, like, oh, as you do the ERP and exposures, like it gets better, and you understand that people are actually on your side and are rooting for you. It's a weird way of rooting for you, but they're behind you, they're sitting with you through the muck, and feeling all those feelings and going through it. But it's been interesting to be on the supporting side of it now with her, and how to throttle that being hard and loving, and like, so it's definitely it's a you either will grow together with it, or I could see how it could really divide a marriage and a relationship. Like, it's just really hard, and I'm lucky enough to have that support. But, yeah.
That was really, I mean, you really summed it up nicely, John, when you said, I mean, about that balancing act kind of between, being caring and also being, being firm enough to be helpful.
For sure. Yeah, it's definitely it's a balance. And you don't always get it right, and it's all right. Like, if you have a partner that doesn't fully understand, there's plenty of resources, books, if if your partner wants to learn, or if you want to educate them, there are resources out there too. And it's good actually for the person that has OCD to read those family books, relationship books also, because it kind of gives you a different perspective of like, oh, this is, they don't, it, you understand what you need to do for yourself, to advocate for yourself, to, address the issue that you want people to fully understand you, but you want people to also like just know that there's issues, and you need to be the one that's like, I need help, reach out to me, like, I need that support, not like having people read your mind, because everyone's got their stuff going on, like life happens, and it's not a dig at you that they're not checking in on you. It's just, out of sight, out of mind, everything's going good if you're not talking, like, if you're not outwardly saying anything, everything's going good, and that's just the perception. But
Awesome, John. Yeah, and I know that she's got to be really, really proud of you to see the strides that you've made. And I mean, I think anybody that lives with someone, I mean, it might not even be a significant other, it might be a spouse. I mean, it might not be a spouse, it might be just parents, or I mean, a friend, and I mean, anybody that's seen change like that. That's got to be something to be proud of for them to be able to see. So, so
no,
thank you for that. Thank you for that, John. Melanie, Melanie, I forgot to mention Melanie's social media handle is OCD Interrupted. You can see it in parentheses down there by her name. But Melanie, has OCD impacted a relationship that you've had with a significant other, or has it, have you learned about the way OCD can impact relationships, or do you have anything to say on that?
Yeah. So, and actually I had this discussion in preparation for this with my therapist, just to ask her what she thought, because, so I've had OCD since I'm a child, and I have, what they call like a cocktail of themes. I would definitely say I have relationship OCD. I had this discussion with my therapist the other day, like, oh, do I have relationship OCD? She's like, well, you have OCD. There's different themes. So someone doesn't have to necessarily be diagnosed with, in my opinion, be diagnosed with relationship OCD in order to identify with it. So what doctor, are we calling her Carrie or Dr. Curran? Sorry.
Carrie. Yeah, I'm a social worker, so Carrie's perfect. Thanks.
Okay, well, what Carrie said is spot on. I have all those obsessions and, you know, probably some of the compulsions. Sometimes I have a hard time differentiating between obsessions and compulsions depending on the theme. But, you know, I haven't been in a true relationship. I've never had someone I called a significant other. I think part of that is because of how I viewed relationships, like, oh, this person might not be the right one. Is this the right person? Is this person good enough? Am I going to find someone better? I don't like how they do this. I don't like how they do that. You know, like, so my OCD affects a lot of things. And I'm actually seeing someone right now who is very patient and understanding about it, but, you know, he's seeing some things with either the hoarding or the OCD that are like, ooh, you know, and we're trying to address that. And I'm, you know, being upfront and open with him because I don't want to miss out on this because, you know, I really like this person. But in previous relationships, it's a lot of questioning, and I still have a lot of questioning with this present one. But I think the reason I've never had like an official significant other is because it's, now that I'm thinking about it, because of the OCD, because of the, you know, is this the right match? And we're, you know, as women especially, we're fed, like Carrie said, a lot of fairy tales, like, and my friends too. It's not just me, like, oh, you know, when's Prince Charming gonna come, or when's Princess Charming gonna come? You know, whatever the case is, you know, I've been looking for that person. So there's never going to be that person. And, you know, part of what I was discussing with my therapist is, you know, that's okay that you don't know. That's okay that you're questioning. And I was like, well, what am I supposed to do? She's like, just go with it. I'm like, well, what do you mean? You know, because I'm not, because I'm very anxious. And she's like, just go with it. Just see what happens. Like, don't just stop interrupting everything. Just like let it flow. So I'm working on trying to allow the you know, just allowing it to happen and letting my thoughts process, and, you know, kind of ignoring them sometimes and just letting it be and see what happens.
Thank you, Melanie. And with no disrespect to the other panelists, I really think that you just sort of tied it up beautifully there. I really do. And you know, and with everything you explained, so yeah, it's and I was just thinking too, I mean, you know, relationships are definitely not black and white. I mean, like you know, like people with untreated OCD like to have things black and white. You know, I mean, you're dealing with two different personalities, two different people with two different, you know, sets of everything really, and you're trying to find you know, some shared ground and grow as a couple, and that's, you don't have to have OCD for that to be hard. And so yeah, it's but this is just one other way that OCD can show up, and unfortunately, it causes a lot of havoc in relationships. But that's what this webinar is all about, is to try to bring some awareness to that, and to sort of be able to put a name to things for people that might be wondering, you know, possibly it could be. Carrie, I wanted to mention back to you too, and feel free to crosstalk and everybody, and if you have anything to add, just can you talk a little bit about compulsive confessing, and if that gets in the way of relationships, kind of telling your partner something that you think that they might need to know that you're thinking, but they might not really need to know what you're thinking.
Yes, definitely. And there was something that Melanie said that kind of got me thinking. And Melanie, I really second what Mike said. I appreciate you sharing your experience and giving some examples, and John as well. But Melanie, you were saying this like, I don't like this about them. And I was thinking to myself, and I would be curious to hear your thoughts if you would agree. I feel like it's less about being like picky and like, I don't like this, I can't stand this, I can't tolerate this, but more like the meaning making that comes when we have OCD. It's like the thoughts that we all have. And like, I think that's true of all like subtypes of OCD normally, or they're usually kind of like normal, common, everyday thoughts. But when we have OCD, it's like, I don't like this about this person. What does that mean? And then we start attaching all this weight and meaning to it. Like, does this mean that they're not the right person for me? Does it mean that like I should, run for the hills before it's too late? It's almost like less about the characteristic that's so much like bothering you as it is like all that we attach to it. So that was a little bit of a tangent, but I think that's like a compulsion that we might see is like adding like the interpretations and just putting a lot of weight into things. And then I've seen, to answer your question about confessing, I've seen that show up in a few different scenarios. Sometimes there can be some guilt in OCD of like, what if I'm stringing this person along and I'm gonna like they don't deserve this, like I'm gonna like screw them over. And so the confessing is almost to like I have to be totally honest with them about my doubts. And that, needless to say, can have a real impact on relationships. I mean, it's important when you're in a relationship that you feel like you can be honest and open with someone, and that if you're having doubts, that you can talk about it as a couple. And at the same time, I mean, if I said every thought I had out loud to people around me, I can only imagine the reactions that I would be getting. And sometimes the confessing is sort of those things that maybe didn't need to be shared out loud, but are done so in a way to relieve ourselves of like this guilt. I've also seen it show up in the form of people having obsessions of like, what if I cheated and I don't remember it? What if I'm attracted to this other person? I've heard of people talk about like after a night out of drinking, the thought of like, and this can be in relationship OCD. It can be like, what if I cheated? It can be like, what if I ran someone over with my car and I don't remember? Like, what if I harmed someone? It's like that loss of control and that inability to have certainty can sometimes show up. And so I've seen people confess things that they likely did not even do. Like, I think I might have cheated on you, or I think I might be attracted to other women, or, might be, fantasizing. And it's a way to be like, I can't sit with this. I have to like the right thing to do is get it off my chest. So in those moments, I would kind of maybe recommend like, take a step back, don't act on it immediately. Oftentimes compulsions have a sense of urgency, and that's where we can really sort of decipher the difference between a compulsion versus more like a value-driven kind of behavior. Like, is there a sense of urgency? If you think about it, if you reflect on it, if you've given it some thought and you think, yeah, I think it's really only fair that my partner knows this, then maybe you tell them. If it's like I can't stand this, I have to tell them and then I'll feel better type of thing, then maybe it's more of like a confessing type of compulsion. And you might ask yourself, is this going to be helpful to the relationship? Is this going to bring us together? Is this something they need to know? Maybe. And if not, is it just designed to get rid of my anxiety? Then we might look at like, what is the impact that that's going to have on the relationship though?
And from the outside looking, or I should say from the inside looking out, like for myself, like if I was in a relationship with somebody with OCD and I didn't have OCD myself, and somebody told me, I think I might have cheated on you, my first reaction would be, oh my gosh. I mean, what do you mean you might have cheated on me? But you only understand. I mean, that's just a piece of what this is. That's not.
Yeah, exactly. That's another way we might be able to kind of determine if it's OCD or not, like OCD versus like real general relationship concerns, is that Sorry, I forget where I was going with this. You were talking about, sorry, I lost my train of thought.
I'll
Come back to me.
I'll jump in real quick. I was just gonna say, you know how you mentioned like, you know, a certain trait or maybe something about them. So I personally get very hyper focused and really like obsess or research or Google questions, like just Google whatever questions come to my head, you know, and actually, you know, sometimes it's probably too much research, but it's like OCD, you know, the OCD monster is like, you know, you have to get the answer. You need the answer right now. So that happens to me a lot. And then the other thing I was going to say is, you had mentioned the confessing. So I was recently like kind of, you know, I'm not in a relationship, so I was dating and I went out with someone a few times and I was like, I'm not sure, you know, how do I know? And then I texted him that, you know, I don't think this is the right relationship, like, or not relationship. I said, you know, I think you're great. You know, I did say I do have OCD and I've been, you know, basically freaking out whether or not I should tell you this or not. But I basically told him, you know, like, I don't think we're a match romantically. And I mentioned that to my therapist. She's like, well, why didn't you go out with him again? And I'm like, well, because I didn't want to waste his time. But, you know, like I had already gone out with him twice. And also, you know, I was dating around and it's like, it's almost like the thing that I think people who don't have OCD will ask is like, when is it OCD and when is it not? Like, when is it just normal questioning about relationships in general or dating? And I have a hard time with that. I mean, I think because I know that I have OCD, I consider it OCD, but I don't know where the line is drawn.
Something that I think can be helpful sometimes to ask ourselves is like, is there an answer to this question? Like, because OCD often takes the form of like, what ifs? So pausing and being like, if I were to spend an hour, 10 hours, 20 hours, is there a way to get to an answer? Or is it like a what if that like no amount of thinking about it is going to get us an answer? Or have I already spent X amount of hours thinking about this? Is there more value to like spending more time on this? Or have I gotten the answer and now I'm going back over it over and over? So sometimes I think that can help us like step back and separate when we're like, oh, this is like obsessing and ruminating versus like, no, this is actually a productive line of thought, something I really do need to like give some thought to or figure out.
Yeah, really, really helpful, Carrie, to put all that context there. And I mean, I know that relationship OCD has definitely shown up in my life. It's not been my primary focus in my, you know, many years of having OCD. But yeah, I can definitely look back now and see, yeah, when I was thinking these bizarre thoughts, like when I was out on a date or whatever, or when my wife and I were dating, you know, thinking, and I even told her, you know, I mean, I'm like, you know, I'm having these thoughts kind of like, you know, I mean, am I really, really in love with you? Am I, you know, I don't know if I'm really in love with you. And once again, I mean, we're kind of back to those, you know, prompting questions again. I mean, or it's kind of like, I mean, but it's just a question. It's another, I mean, it's another question, and it's trying to find that certainty around what you're concerned about. And but yeah, so it's shown up for me as well. And I, you know, hearing you talk there too, I mean, I can also see like where like some moral scrupulosity could tie in there as well, you know, with kind of like, you know, thinking about the whole confessing part, like, you know, well, you know, this is what a good person would do. A good person would tell this person, and I'm a good person, so I need to do the right thing and tell this person.
Yeah.
Yeah, what does it mean about me or say about me if I don't tell this person?
Yeah, it's funny as you talk about the confessing thing, I could see that playing a role in my relationship with my wife and how certain times there's just she's like, do you really need to share that with me? Like, did not bring any, did not. And it's kind of like if I was to wait and just kind of like, think about it, I probably wouldn't mention it, but it's just like out there. And it's kind of, even it, I wouldn't say, I would say it, I think Carrie was saying that there's no like, or no, Melanie was saying with your therapist about you have OCD, so it's gonna travel. But like, kind of, I have this pattern with my wife where I'm like, "Are you sure you like me? Are you sure you want to be in the? Are you sure? You're sure?" And she's just like, "Oh my god!" Like, or like, "Are you okay?" And it's just a constant like loop. I've never like until we started talking about this webinar, like I had never really thought about that as being a bad thing, but I'm like, oh, maybe it's over excessive, and it's probably a because I like to think that I have my OCD kind of figured out, but then it's always like just still a whack-a-mole of like, oh, it's still popping up other random ways that it will just continue. So
But yeah, and it sounds like you're asking her for, I mean, I do the same thing, but it's like you're asking her for reassurance.
yeah, I mean, without like even know why I'm asking for reassurance, like it's just it's like a weird tick. Like I don't know what the I don't know what the goal is.
Well, thank you all for being on here again, and it's been a pleasure. I hope that this resonates with someone or a few people at least. And we're coming up on Valentine's Day here. It's not quite Valentine's Day yet, but don't let OCD sacrifice meaningful relationships.
Yeah, my advice would maybe be take the day off of OCD for Valentine's Day. Like, what if you just enjoyed Valentine's Day without having to know if this was the permanent or the right relationship, and just let yourself be in the moment and say, I can figure that out tomorrow. I can figure out that, whatever. But for now, I'm just going to have this uncertainty, and I'm going to just use my mindfulness skills to be in the moment and celebrate Valentine's Day, whatever that might look like for each person.
I like the tagline, Valentine's Day, a day of uncertainty.
That should be on one of the little candy hearts that they make.
It is, yeah. But what gift am I going to get for Valentine's Day? Am I going to get a gift for Valentine's Day? Yeah. Any final thoughts from anybody, John? Anything?
I would say one thing that my wife, and it's one of their things was like as a support for me, she's like, this is his dragon to slay. And that's kind of, as someone that supports someone with OCD and stuff, like it's just about being there and being present and sitting with them in the discomfort and just being there. Like sometimes you won't know what to do, but as long as you're just there to be present or just ask what you need, and it doesn't mean you have to like enable the OCD, because that's not, but it's just that having that support goes a long way. Just to, like, I don't know where I would be without my wife as my main support. So yeah, that's what I got.
Well, tune in for the next one. And thank you again for being on the channel today, and happy Valentine's Day. And we hope to talk to you soon. Thank you.
Take care.
Thanks so much.